Having been involved in the tax sector for over 4 decades, I have developed a keen eye for identifying discrepancies and loopholes in the law. The issue. Laws should be explicit and unambiguous. However, the Constitution of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka and the Presidential Elections Act, No. 15 of 1981, do not fully meet these criteria. This article exposes a major flaw in both the Constitution and the Act related to the preference voting system in presidential elections. Presently, preference votes are disregarded when a candidate receives more than 50% of the valid votes, a common occurrence since the enactment of the Act. However, given the significant changes in Sri Lanka's political landscape over the past 3 years, compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic and economic challenges, it is increasingly improbable for any candidate to secure such a majority. This situation highlights a serious concern. If preference votes come into play because no candidate achieves the 50% threshold, the final winner may not truly reflect the majority's will. This flaw emphasizes the urgent need to meticulously review and possibly amend the Constitution to better embody the democratic tenet of majority governance. Election results. Past and 2024 opinion polls theses give percentages of votes in actual president elections. This gives a set of opinion poll for 2024 presidential election. Polling firm, Institute for Health Policy, This clearly shows following points. Until now, counting preferences was unnecessary, as a majority of over 50% was consistently achieved. In 2024, a preference count is likely to be needed. Historically, the first 2 candidates secured more than 90% of the votes, but in 2024, this might decrease to 70% or less. Consequently, parties outside the top 2 could garner around 30% of the votes in 2024. Drawing from first-hand experience as an election official, including overseeing numerous elections, there is evident confusion among voters regarding preference marking and inconsistency among officials in manual preference counting. While this was not a concern in presidential elections, it has been an issue in parliamentary and local government elections. The prospect of a closely contested election could complicate preference counting significantly. Challenges and prospects in Sri Lanka's electoral leadership and process. The current Sri Lankan president, appointed by parliament following the predecessor's resignation, was not elected through a popular vote but received his seat based on the party's total vote tally. This method of appointment has raised doubts about the mandate's legitimacy, exacerbated by controversial reforms he initiated. The situation highlights a broader issue with the electoral system, particularly as the country transitions to nationwide elections with likely preference counting. Historically, the electoral process has been straightforward, with more than 50% of the votes typically going to just 2 parties, ensuring clear winners. However, recent political and economic shifts indicate a move towards a more fragmented electorate, with no party likely to secure an outright majority. This change necessitates a reliable preference counting system to ensure that future presidents genuinely represent the majority's will. The evolving political landscape, marked by the rise of smaller parties and changing voter sentiments, underscores the urgent need to refine the preference counting mechanism. This approach should address past challenges of manual vote tallying and adapt to the current realities, where a more diverse vote distribution may occur. Ensuring an electoral system that accurately captures the voters' preferences is crucial for maintaining the integrity and fairness of Sri Lanka's presidential elections. Article 93 of the Sri Lankan Constitution mandates that elections for the president, parliament, and referendums must be conducted freely, equally, and secretly, emphasizing the principle of equality in voting. Article 94 outlines the preferential voting system for presidential elections, where voters can specify their preferences. If no candidate wins more than half the votes, the system eliminates candidates from the bottom up, considering only the top 2's preferences, ensuring the elected president reflects a broader consensus of the electorate. A practical example involves three primary parties: Pohadawa, SJB, and NPP. Pohadawa secures the majority of votes, predominantly from staunch supporters. SJB garners the second highest vote count, mainly from undecided voters, while NPP ranks third, also receiving a significant portion of their votes from staunch supporters. The SJB's base of undecided voters, seeking change and not favoring the incumbent party Pohadawa, tend to give their secondary preference to NPP. Thus, while these voters primarily support SJB, they prefer NPP as a secondary choice if SJB cannot secure a win. On the other hand, voters for Pohadawa and NPP, being staunch supporters, are less likely to allocate their preferences to other parties as they do not wish for any other party to prevail. Given SJB's position as the runner-up, it remains a contender in the preference tally. However, the final outcome sees Pohadawa victorious, contrary to the desires of the majority who preferred either SJB or NPP over Pohadawa. This situation brings into question the principles outlined in Article 93. Election to be free, equal, and secret, specifically the aspect of equality. The stipulation demands that the electoral process for the President of the Republic, members of Parliament, and any referenda be conducted freely, equally, and through secret ballot. The contested outcome suggests a breach of the equality component, indicating a discrepancy between the election result and the broader electoral preference. Understanding Sri Lanka's hybrid electoral system. Sri Lanka's electoral framework has evolved into a hybrid model, influenced by both the French and Irish voting systems, since transitioning to a French-style executive presidency in 1978. Here's how these influences play out. Irish system overview. In the Irish system, known as single transferable vote, STV, voters rank candidates in order of preference. The counting process eliminates the least popular candidates sequentially, redistributing their votes to remaining candidates based on voter preferences until someone achieves a majority. French system overview. The French electoral system operates through a two-round process. Initially, voters choose among all candidates. If no candidate gains a majority, a second round takes place between the top two, allowing voters to reassess and make a final decision. Contrast with Sri Lankan system. Sri Lanka's electoral system, a hybrid of French and Irish models, allows voters to rank candidates similarly to the Irish system's preferential voting. Unlike Ireland's sequential elimination, Sri Lanka historically focused on two main parties, quickly narrowing down to the top two candidates and bypassing lesser parties. This contrasts with the French two-round system, which provides a reflective interlude for voters to reassess their choices, highlighting differences in how each system handles voter preferences and democratic representation. Conclusion and legal pathways for electoral system reform in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka must amend its constitution and election laws to ensure electoral integrity and avoid the socio-political unrest and financial waste of past flawed elections. The judiciary's proactive role is essential, allowing for preemptive judicial review to correct potential constitutional discrepancies and avoid political manipulation. This approach ensures the electoral system's alignment with democratic principles, accurately reflecting voter intent and fostering a stable, financially prudent, and democratic process. Legislative and public support, combined with judicial oversight, is vital for the timely implementation of these necessary reforms.